Hello again, 122. In this video, I am going to discuss how the Bolsheviks and Vladimir Lenin came to seize control of the White Russian government in November of 1917. This is a nice article I found last spring from Encyclopedia Britannica, and it nicely describes what happened. You have to understand in the Russian Revolution is that it was two revolutions. There was the first one which overthrows the Tsar in March, and then the second one in late October, November, which put the Bolsheviks in power. It's obvious even before 1917 that the bond between the Tsar and the Russian people has been dissolving. There was an attempted revolution in 1905 in the aftermath of the Russo-Japanese War, which the Russians lost and demonstrated for the first time that they're not this mighty military power anymore. And by 1917, it's gone completely. The Tsar had attempted to dissolve the Duma, or the Russian parliament, and which had been established finally in the aftermath of that attempted revolution in 1905. And by doing so, this is now driving many of the ethnic minorities to become restive under the domination of the main Russian group. Russia has all kinds of different people living. It's a huge country. It's the largest country on earth, and it's not just one ethnic group that makes up that continent and that domain. And there are two big reasons why this revolution then takes place immediately. The long-range implications, the long-range reasons I've just explained, but the two immediate ones are the government's inefficient prosecution of World War I, which demonstrated that the old regime could not provide what the military needed in order to cope with the German armies. They're getting defeated in campaign after campaign. And it disrupted the economy as well because the country is slowly going bankrupt. And not only that, the second big reason is there's a scarcity of food in Petrograd, formerly called St. Petersburg. And by the end of February, most of the Petrograd garrison had joined in the revolt against the Tsar. And Nicholas II, the last of the Romanovs, the last of the 300-year dynasty, finally abdicates his throne in March. If you're wondering why there's two different dates here, is that the Russian people follow the Orthodox Christian calendar and not the Gregorian one of the Western Roman Catholic Church. And when his brother, the Grand Duke Michael, refused the throne, as I mentioned, the dynasty comes to an end. So the Duma then appoints a provisional government to succeed the autocracy or the rule of one. But it faced a rival in the Petrograd Soviet Workers and Soldiers Deputies. These are councils or direct democracy units that exist in different areas of the country. And this Soviet soon proves that it had greater authority than the provisional government. And the provisional government's main mistake is they continued to prosecute the war. And this is something that the Russian people do not support. And the Soviets then openly defy this provisional government. And they're not going to the point where they're going to seek or find a conservative reaction against them. That's going to happen after the war ends. And the Russian Revolution then continues into the early 1920s. But at this time, the provisional government gets reorganized 4 different times. And originally it was full of liberal members who are interested in democratizing the country. But they are a distinct minority, and eventually this provisional government comes to be dominated by Alexander Kerensky, who is a socialist. And all of these governments to November will be coalitions. And as you'll see from political science class, coalitions are inherently weak governments because they demonstrate the folly of tyranny of the majority. Just because you have a number doesn't mean you're doing things that are correct or right for the country. And coalitions have to find majorities in order to govern. And it's difficult. None of them are able to adequately address the problems of the country, and there's all kinds of land seizures going on by the peasants. There's independence movements in non-Russian areas, and the morale of the army is totally collapsing at this point by 1917. The Petrograd Soviet is in much closer contact with the sentiments of the people than the provisional government was. And eventually, these Soviets are pushing the idea of getting out of the war. And there is an attempted coup by Levar Grigorievich Kornilov, who, according to some historians, Kerensky may have initially plotted with in hope of gaining control over the Petrograd Soviet. However, he is unable to stop this increasing slide into political, economic, and military chaos. And his party suffers a major split as the left wing breaks from the Socialist Revolutionary Party. But while the provisional government's power waned, that of the Soviets was increasing, and the Bolsheviks come to dominate within the Soviets. And by September, the Bolsheviks and their allies, the left Socialist Revolutionaries, had overtaken the Socialist Revolutionaries and the Mensheviks, who were more conservative socialists, who wanted to use the ballot box to initiate change. But the Bolsheviks are violent revolutionaries under Lenin, and they will adopt this slogan that was adopted by the women of the Petrograd Soviet initially, of peace, land, and bread. And this gains the support of the Russian people. And finally, in November, the Bolshevik Revolution takes place, and they take over government buildings, the telegraph stations, and other strategic points. Kerensky wasn't able to organize any resistance, and he fled the country. And the Second All-Russian Congress of Soviets convened in Petrograd and approves the new Union of Soviet Socialistic Republics. And it's run by Bolshevik commissars. And here's where I got all this information from.